And we are live, I do believe, Jeff. So my technology is not always the best, but hey guys, thanks for joining us. I'm Alan Thomas with my buddy, Captain Jeff Andrechyn. He's retired captain of American Airlines recently, and adventure, world explorer, all that kind of stuff. And give him a chance to talk here in a second. But for those of you that haven't joined me before, this is a live I do every day. Today's about day number 55 of 90, and it's about rethink dieting. My story is in 2017, I stepped on the scales at 304 pounds and looked down, and it was, oh my God, what have I done? And I realized that I was likely to be known as my wife's first husband, because I'd probably be dead in 5 to 10 years. I really hadn't lived out my dreams. It was all of those things that you meant to do, that you wanted to do. And I realized that I still could have a long life if I took care of myself. And I publicly committed to losing 129 pounds in 265 days. I missed that mark. I did it in 260 days. And I don't say that to impress you guys at all, because I was the biggest failure of anybody out there at weight loss. You name the diet, I was on it, and I failed at it. So I failed at the best of them. But if it was the diet, all you guys that are watching this that struggle with obesity like I did would have 32-inch waist and 6-pack abs already. So it's more than that. Do you have to change what you eat? Of course you do. Do you have to move your body? Of course. But I believe that's the 2%, not the 98. And so that's my story. But today's a little different. Having Jeff on the live with me is pretty cool. Give you a smidge and a backstory that I'm going to let him talk. He and I met, I think it was about 2011, 2012, I think, at a retreat up in Georgia. And that's, I won't give you that whole story, but that was an amazing adventure to be on with him. And, he's spoken a lot of truth into my life. And what I personally believe, and I know Jeff agrees with this, is there's, when people have struggles in their life, whether it's obesity or some other, you can call it addiction or call it struggle, there's something underlying. It's never just the surface. And Jeff, said something to me the other day that just, man, it got my attention about being the men have been domesticated. And it just caught my heart. And people say, what's got to do with dieting? A bunch. So anyway, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me today. So tell us a little bit about you, and so everybody knows. You tell it better than I do.
Hey, I would love to do that, but I've got to talk to you about your intro. What I thought was fascinating was that what kept you going is that you still had dreams that were unfulfilled yet, and that you wanted to live them out, right? And so desire winds up being incredibly important. It's the thing that moves us. What were those dreams for you, Alan?
It's funny. I just felt like there was something inside of me that God wasn't finished with. And I couldn't, and what's so crazy, and it's a circular dream almost, is me standing on the scale was this gift that God gave me. It didn't feel like a gift that day. I promise you, it felt like a disaster. But overcoming that was the dream, and now being able to help men with that and see the clouds clear for these men is what the dream was. And I never knew it. It was it's crazy. Only God can figure that kind of stuff out. It's way above my head.
What was interesting, and just here's the truth bomb. During this whole COVID thing, I was still flying. And I was running what I consider suicide missions. I was going right into San Francisco in the heart of this pandemic. And it was coming down to making a decision of, hey, do I just quit? Do I just call in sick? What do I do? And then the company, in the midst of all this, offered an early out package. And I thought to myself at one point with COVID, I'm like, you know what? I don't care. If I get it and I go, then I win. I go to be with God. I just don't care. But when the package came to us for early retirement, I thought to myself, well, hold on, I don't really want to die right now. There are so many things I want to do. And this would be my opportunity to do them. This is my chance, actually. This is a gift. It's a 2.5-year gift that they're going to give me. because that's how much longer I had to go before I retired. And I'm like, you know what? I've always wanted to buy an Airstream, and I just want to travel across the country and want to finish that book that I started a long time ago. And what woke up was desire in me, and it was dormant. So here's Mr. Adventure, really living in somewhat of a depression of just having to. I looked at the next 2 years as, well, I got to make as much money as possible, so I'm just going to work. I'm going to grunt it out and work. And given that chance to be set free and unmoored, that this storm actually unmoored me from those responsibilities and gave me this opportunity to do it. So I talked my wife into a new truck to pull the Airstream camper, and went out and got the Airstream camper, and we are going to go, but desire, just like you, that it's sitting there. And so I heard one guy that talked about being in an Airstream and moving around the country. And he said, people ask me, they tell me you're living my dream. And I turn to them and say, well, how come you're not living your dream? What are you doing buried down in all this duty and obligation and performance and things that really are taking you out? So anyway, thank you. I really, really enjoy hearing that, that's what motivated you to go, you know what, I don't want to die. I still got a lot of things I really want to do right now.
Yeah. And it's so, and when I talk to men every day that are struggling with obesity, and they're calling me, and, and I'll say this, health important? Well, of course it is. Is being able to move and get out of a chair and not have the embarrassment. I mean, I was one of those guys that had the two seatbelt guys on the aircraft, when I flew somewhere and I didn't fly. Yeah. And there's so much shame, and there's so much of this attached to it. And you tend to want to go into hiding, but when I'm talking to men on the phone, I want to know what their dream is, because that's what I always love to get to.
Yeah.
And it's like, yesterday, and because I want you to talk, not me, but one of the guys I've been working with, and I think I talked about this last night. He's down like 9 inches off his waist, and I hear 9 inches off your waist. I mean, come on, that's crazy. That's a lot. And yeah. He's gotten into all these physical fitness things that I didn't direct him to do, I mean, but he's now seeing these leaps and bounds in just his other areas of his life that have nothing to do with weight. And that's what I tell men. There's a 3 foot from where you are, there's a vein of gold. And I said, and if you want somebody else to find the vein of gold and you miss it, yeah, man, because I think we do have choices. So, but I love your story of adventure and all, because I mean, I think it's in all of us, and kind of speak to that. I just,
on that subject of finding your dream, when Lindbergh crossed the ocean back in 1927. He became actually the most famous man in the world when he touched down in Paris. And everyone had to say something about him. Churchill said, this is what a man looks like. He was willing to go out beyond the maps, take this ultimate adventure. But I love what F. Scott Fitzgerald said. He said, in the speakeasies, he said, we all put our glasses down. This young Minnesotan did something that moved every one of us to the point where we remembered our oldest, best dreams, and that when we see people take an adventure and go out beyond their maps and take a risk like that, it inspires a whole generation of people behind them, to the point where most of the astronauts, their most favorite guy was Lindbergh, So one good exploration begets another one. But anyway, a little bit about my story. I grew up in New Jersey, born in 1957. I lived on a block with just 60 other kids my age. We were all Catholics. We attended the same parish church, which we had no idea really what was going on in there. To us, the Trinity was, football, baseball, and basketball. And church to us was the way we defended each other, one neighborhood to another. So we played quite a bit. My dad was an airline pilot, and he just took us with him. So I got to see the world as it really looked from this metal tube that was pressurized, where we could get up to altitude and look around. And so I saw cultures like, we were so far into Japan that, you know, they didn't even not only speak English, they didn't even have knives and forks. So either we figured out how to eat with chopsticks, or we didn't eat. You know, I can remember going to Vietnam in '69. My father flew us in there right in the middle of the war because we were bringing supplies in to our troops in Vietnam. But you know, he flew for a charter company, so we went to all these hotspot destinations. So we went to Barbados, we went to Hawaii. He took us to Athens, and we got to go up and see the Acropolis, and we watched a light show at night where they lit it up and told the history of Greece. And so it was really a great way to grow up, with the idea that there was a lot of movement in my life. There wasn't anything very stationary about it. And so I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. You know, I'm the adventurist. I'm the enthusiast. And there's something about, I have to be in motion. So it was very obvious career choice for me to become an airline pilot. Married now for 34 years to Dana, and we have a great time. I still very much in love with her, chasing her around the house a lot. We were just on a date last night. So I've got 2 kids. They were I loved them, troublemakers growing up, and now they're 31 and 29, and they have become like best friends. So wonderful experience there. And you know, just my likes. I love reading. I love history. I love bike riding, tennis, kayaking. You know, softball, senior softball is a huge thing for me. Anything to get me outside. So we live on a lake, and we have a boat club out there, and we love to get out there. And I think the thing that I fear the most in life is not being able to move, being stationary. And so I went to the doc for a thyroid issue. And I've been with this doc for a while, and he knows that I'm up on this stuff, but I'm just not following my regimen on taking good care of my thyroid. And he says, here, I want you to read this book. And that's all he said. Then he charged me like, you know, what, $300, you know, so I could go read this book. And the book was called Go Wild. And it was a very interesting book in the sense that the book was about movement. And they're linking everything from diabetes to Alzheimer's to a sedentary domesticated lifestyle. And the book really opens up this idea of movement and how important it is that we were given a brain so that we can move, so that we can figure out and move. And that, to me, I thought was really interesting. They actually talked about this one particular sea urchin that has a brain, but once it locks onto a big rock, it actually eats its brain because it doesn't need it anymore, because it's not going to move anymore. And so he really got me out there again and getting back into motion and exercise. And he says, you know, even the treadmill isn't really that good for you because you're not engaging your brain during it. He wanted you out there trail running or hiking because you're figuring out your next step. You know, you're looking at your water supply. There's things that you're figuring out. You've engaged your brain on this particular run. And so I've really gotten into this subject of movement. And if you look at the scripture, and really the first believer was Abraham, they did a dig on the Euphrates River where they uncovered this civilization called Sumer. And in Sumer, it was a very advanced civilization. They had one elevated area where they had the Temple of the Moon. And that's where they actually worshiped the moon. And that place was called the Ur of Chaldees. And that's where Abraham was from. Abraham wasn't some nomad out there running. He was in a very established, advanced civilization when God called him and said, hey, let's go on a walkabout. I'm going to take you to a place and just follow me. We'll make this stuff up as we go. And so the transformative process was one of movement, was one of following God. There wasn't anything stationary about it. And when you look at that and bring it into the New Testament, Jesus takes 12 guys on a 3-year high adventure camping trip. There was not one day that they could figure out looked like the day before. There was nothing that they could count on. Could you imagine rolling into a synagogue on Sunday and Jesus is about to heal a paralytic and you're thinking, oh, that's it, man. We're going to get run out of town. You know, I was hoping for a bed and a dinner tonight, and we're going to get chased out of town here. You know, there was just nothing predictable about it, you know? And so I think it was, her name's escaping me, but she said, you know, the opposite of faith is not rebellion. The opposite of faith is predictability. To live in a predicted life, a place of non-movement where you know exactly what's going to happen from day to week after, is actually the opposite of faith, you know? Wow. And so I think when we're actively engaged with this faith, there is this particular movement and uncertainty and mystery into following God. So that's a little bit about my story.
No, that's awesome. And that, you know, that speaks to, you know, this domestication that you talk about, you know, that you were talking about the other day. And I think it's, you know, so many of the men that, you know, when we become sedentary and you know, my core belief is you need to move, you need to do all that. You got to, if you weigh 304 pounds like I did, movement's not easy. So you got to change what you're eating, of course, but it's never just about the eating and the movement for the weight loss, but it's really about changing between here and wanting something, like you said, the desire, you know, that was, we're totally unscripted if nobody can tell. This is just two guys talking, but it's so interesting, you know, when I think about, and you brought something to my mind, you know, when Jesus was walking into the temple and he said to the paralytic that had been there for over 30 something years, he said to him, do you want to be well? And I mean, I want to think about that in perspective of this guy's been being carried back and forth for 30 plus years. I can't remember how many exact years it was, over 30 years. Yeah. And here, this random guy who he probably doesn't know, you know, at that point, but he happens to be the Son of God and all. And he's there and he's saying, do you want to get well? Well, yeah, of course I do. But this guy, what he says in his next words, which is really interesting to me, is he says, he gives them a list of excuses why he can't be well. And then I always thought it was such a, how could God ask that? I mean, how rude is that? You know, I mean, it really didn't catch it, but a friend of mine who's a pastor who hasn't been able to walk without crutches most of his life or all of his life, he said, I'm going to show you what that verse meant. And he, in front of about 800 people, he's on stage, he had somebody come get his crutches and he laid down on the floor. And the whole idea behind that pool of Bethsaida was when an angel stirred the water. When angels stirred the water, the first one in got healed. And so he says, let me explain something to y'all. If I'm at the pool, I'm winning. Now, this guy's very competitive. This guy's he's a man's man, super competitive, but, you know, he walks with crutches. So he lays down on the floor. He's got his microphone on and, you know, wireless mic. He says, so here, let me draw this. He's looking straight up, you know, laid flat on his back. And he says, okay, angel stirs water. This guy rolls 20 feet. You know, like he says, guys, and then they brought his crutches to him and he got back up to his podium. He says, what does a baby do when they can't get to something before they can walk? They roll. He said, if you want it bad enough, there's always a way. And he said, so Jesus was asking a very, very important. And that also speaks to weight loss. You know, I talk to guys or whatever it is, you know, whatever they're dealing with. Yeah. Is there a way? Of course there is. And in fact, I'll tell you one, you know, because I want you to speak to, you know, that adventuresome part. But, you know, it's the only place I can find where Jesus performed a miracle. And I'm not a theologian by any means, but he performed a miracle and he sought back out that guy after he performed a miracle. You know, he fled after he healed him because it was on a Sunday. Then he tracked him down in the synagogue. And he said, and now somebody else may can find another spot where he healed somebody and went back to him, but I can't find another spot. He goes back to the guy and he says, you know, in 2020 vernacular, or US vernacular, hey, what's up? You looks like you're walking around pretty good now. And so, and the guy says, yeah. And Jesus says, stop sinning lest something else worse come upon you. Now, what did he mean? What did he do? You know, well, excuses, lack of faith. Excuse. That's the only thing I can figure on it. That's the first question I got for Jesus when I get there.
Yeah.
About that. But speak to that heart. I want to, you know, you've had so many adventures, and
yeah,
I quote you a lot, and so you're probably gonna have to send me a bill for all the time.
Yeah. Well, you know, so you know, I think in a sense, you know, we all deal with addictions, and it's a great thing to talk about and to be honest about. But I have a little bit of a different take on addictions. And when things come up in my life, and I start to begin to deal with them, it's not so much always going to performance and getting my life right, as so much as I ask myself, what risk has God asked me to take that I decided to not take? Okay. So my first thing is not how do I overcome these thoughts or that action or whatever that particular thing is, whatever that sin is, but what has God asked me to do that I'm not doing? And I've come to realize that, you know, the idea that Christianity hasn't been tried and found wanting, rather Christianity hasn't been tried, because it takes a tremendous amount of faith to follow a wild God. And we're going to actually play it safe. And so we're going to fortify ourselves in a house. We're going to fortify ourselves with a job and responsibilities. And we're going to fortify ourselves even in church. You know, somehow we think just showing up on Sunday and putting something in the box as if somehow God's, you know, we're right with God for doing that. And in a sense, we make our lives so predictable. And so what does it look like? I love the idea, travel lightly, but with great purpose. What does it look like to move out of our comfort zone and into risk? And why is it that we have to do that? And so I'm going to talk about just for a second the Lewis and Clark adventure, because we have a lot of great, we have a good history of people who went out beyond their maps. So when they went out west, they had no idea what was out there. They knew about the West Coast and they knew about up to St. Louis, but after that, they really had no idea where they were going. Now, at that time, 2 out of 3 Americans were already living within 50 miles of the Atlantic Ocean. They were living in the known at that time. And so when these guys go out there, Jefferson has to take and show them how to shoot their longitude by looking at the moons going around Jupiter, believe it or not. And so it was this huge risk. And we always think of explorers as going out, as leaving behind. But in reality, what we're all searching for is more intimacy with God, is getting into a place where we're actually absolutely dependent upon Him to survive in any given environment. And so we're looking for that garden experience. And so when these guys were out there and all the danger of grizzly bears, of hostile Indian tribes, of terrain that was almost impossible to cross, in their difficulty of overcoming those things, they were at the top peak of their life. They were living life to its top. Even during COVID, flying into San Francisco and all the nervousness about it, we were living life to its top, man. You know, we're on the adventure, man. We're taking refugees into San Francisco and we're taking people out. We're taking supplies in for the hospitals, and we're living life to its top, you know. And I think that that's the thing that when I look at about addictions and settling and becoming domesticated, is this idea of really kind of got it all figured out. And I don't really need any faith to move on. And so that desire that I think you had to bring this message to men is the thing that brings us out of our addictions, I think. And by the way, that thing that you want to do mostly is going to look impossible to do. It's going to seem like it's almost too much, because God has given you that desire, but you see only your shortfalls. You see your faults. You see all the things that have come against you, but God sees you for actually who you really are. And the fact that you're very much capable of doing those things. Like the story you were telling me about that man who you said, I want you to win this this tournament that you've entered. You know, he at first doesn't believe he can win it, but in fact, you actually see him better than he sees himself. And you're telling him, yeah, you actually can win this thing, you know?
Yep. He's a rock star. He just hadn't figured it completely out.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why we need other people in our lives, because they can actually see things about us that we can't see. We believe the lies. You know, the enemy's a liar, and he, you know, he's told us things about ourselves. You know, I grew up not very good student at all. You know, I was more of a, you know, if you read Iron John, I'm the flyer. You know, I want to be the guy skipping off the top of the universe, you know, contemplating, you know, the future. I don't really want to descend down into the nitty gritty. So I was not a good student at all, and grew up with the idea that, you know, I was an idiot. You know, I was not smart, and it wasn't true. And I believe this even as I was an airline pilot. You know, I'm flying people around to Europe thinking I'm an idiot. You know, and how does that happen? You know, and so these lies are so close to our vest that for someone to come along and expose them as lies, that person almost looks like a traitor. You know, when God comes for your heart, he looks like a traitor, because he's gonna bring things out that you know, it's like you've believed these false lies about yourself for so long. In order for you to go forward, okay, all right, so we're talking a little bit about weight loss. Listen, for you to move forward in your journey, you're going to have to get rid of some of that baggage that you've been carrying for a long time. And it's not weight. It's right. The I can't. Why can't you? Who told you you can't? Why are you believing that about yourself? Those are the things that you've got to drop. And that takes a good counselor to go in there. And God bless you, Alan, for doing this for men. Because I know what you're looking for is you're looking for the real heart.
Oh yeah. And when it shows up, and it shows up every time. I mean, it's, you know, it's like one of the guys that was this first with me, and Mark, and he's talked about this publicly, Mark Delaney, and Mark's amazing. Yeah, like he's kind of like you. Every time he opens his mouth, I want to get my pen out and write, but he'd never run a mile in his life. He's 48, 49 years old. And it's such a beautiful story. I mean, I didn't tell him to do this. You know, he's losing weight, and, you know, he's gotten quite a bit of weight off. And he says, I'm going to run a mile. I'm going to tackle something else. I'm going to tackle something else. And he videos himself like in October or November of last year. I can't remember exactly when it was, you know, running a mile. And what was so amazing was he had family members travel 14 hours to run with him. How cool. He didn't know it. They surprised him. I mean, it was beautiful.
Isn't that great? We all need that support, right? You know,
and they're running. I mean, the video quality is not great, but it's just, I mean, bring tears, Jez. It's amazing. And so what is this guy doing now? I mean, he's uncovering purpose for men and kids and stuff. He's doing things that his weight, you know, because the question that triggered me really was when a guy asked me, he said, what's holding you back? So what's holding you back? And he was asking in a business context, like, you know, because I've been a sales guy for 40 years. Okay. And asking me in business context. And so weight should have nothing to do with that conversation. But I was transparent with this guy. And I said, my weight. And that was what started the domino. That was the domino, you know, the first domino that fell. And, you know, it's just fun to see these guys when they realize that they're in a prison of obesity. That's really what it's like. You know, a good friend of mine who he always prefer I don't say his name because he doesn't want to ever take any glory in you know, in being, you know, overcoming alcoholism, but he was an alcoholic for, you know, many years. Got clean in 93, hasn't had a drink. I guess that's the right word to use, but hasn't had a drink since. But he was one of my big cheerleaders early on. And in the journey, and he said, and it was so neat to see what he was doing. And, you know, he would travel. He's a very wealthy guy today financially, and he traveling the And this is real time. Are you going on an adventure right now? Looks like you're on an adventure.
Sorry, man.
It's good.
My wife's making a little too much noise downstairs. She doesn't know I'm on.
It's all good. But he's on this, has had a drink since 93, done exceptionally well. And I noticed that he was, in Costa Rica going to AA meetings. He's taken men to AA meetings. He's such an inspiration to me in the process. But he told me the day that I hit 175 pounds, he called me, he said, congratulations, I got some bad news for you. He said, what I've overcome is easier than what you overcame. I never have to go in a bar again as long as I live. He said, you still got to eat. He said, so the victory's on the other side of this. He said, today you really begin. And it was really, it's true. Wow. And so many men that I work with, I mean, they're, when they find their, the reason, and it becomes almost cliche sounding, but it really is the truth, finding these nuggets in their life and realizing that there's simple steps that you can take. And they find out that their prison door, this caged them forever. Yeah. And these guys, a lot of these guys were caged for years and years. I was caged for 40 years. Yeah. It was a prison of my own making. And all I had to do was lean on the door and it opened. And one thing, in fact, Mark said this, and I'm giving, he said this, he said, Alan, he said, it's like the door is always open. He said, even though I'm not to my, he wasn't to his, term goal weight, when you're outside of the door, you're free. And this is what's interesting. When I posted a picture, I don't know if you saw it on Facebook, announcing this thing. It was the day that you came to Jacksonville. It was April 5th. I had to look this up, and we'd had a picture taken because I was on the outside of that prison at that point, even though I was still 281. I mean, I was not skinny by any means. I was a big boy. Yeah. And we had this picture. And I'm like, oh my God, I was huge still. But I was on the outside of that prison when you came, and you were wanting to make sure I hadn't gone totally Looney Tunes because I was doing this journey publicly. Yeah. And so I'm like, I don't get it. I'm like, I'm free. And so even though I still had another, 106 pounds to go, I looked up, I was 281 that morning. Even though I still had another 160 pounds to go, you're free. So this is what I want guys to see. The freedom that you seek is closer than you can ever imagine. And so anyway, but keep on going, Jeff, go ahead.
Let me jump on that. I want to talk a little bit about this cage being open, because this was just exactly my experience. I had gotten to a point with only 3 years left of flying that this is my time to make as much money as possible. And I live in base. And so trips would break up and I would get offered all these premium out and backs. And so I'm flying these things and I'm bringing in a lot of money, but I'm available almost every day for them if they need me. And so
now slow down for the non-airline guys. Okay. Yeah. So what's an out and back and what's that? Yeah, explain that. I don't know what you mean.
So I live in Charlotte. Hey, Jeff, we just need to head you up to Norfolk and fly an airplane back. Okay, so I can leave here at 12 and home at 4 o'clock for dinner, Okay. And so wonderful, but really I'm just focused on productivity. Okay. And so when this offer came, that I can get out of this, that the kid, we can let you out of the cage, that you don't have to, you can get off this performance treadmill you're on. I actually took the early out, and then eventually I figured out, I'm talking to my wife. I'm like, the cage is open right now. The cage is open. And you know what the real question was? Am I going to get out now, or am I going to stay here? Okay. The cage is open. What am I going to do? Okay. Because I've been talking about this adventure for all these years. Am I actually going to do it? And if I don't do that adventure, and if I play it safe, is that really the best thing to do? Because it's always a risk to do this adventure. It makes no financial sense at all to buy a new truck and an Airstream and maybe even sell your house and take off. It just makes no sense. Anything that you want to really do is not going to make any sense to the business people around you and the bean counters. And so I'm looking at this cage is open. And am I actually going to do something and get out of this thing? And so I want to tie this whole thing back about getting off the performance treadmill, because you mentioned that most of the guys that are heavy guys are good men. Oh yeah. These are the good boys.
Mm-hmm.
And, we always want to please everyone and do the right thing. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
And we do live under a performance treadmill about how we do and how we please everyone and how we do the right thing, only to find out it's really not doing us a lot of good at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think spiritually, and this is the most important thing, is getting off that performance treadmill and finding your acceptance, and you are loved by God right now where you are. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to keep pleasing and doing the right thing because it's really not working for me anyway. And I need to get off that performance treadmill and into just learning how to be loved by God. And that settledness that comes with that is the thing that opens up that cage door, and that you can then walk out into freedom.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I get this picture, I love the movie Lord of the Rings and that series. And when whatever the elf king, I can't, his name is Armand, I think is his name, when he comes to Aragorn in the tent and says, it's time to put off the ranger. And what he's saying to him during that time is while you've been out here fighting and doing all this stuff, he says, now you really got to step into who you were made to be.
Yeah.
And he says there's a way to win. There's a way to win against evil, but you're not going to like it. It's going to be the greatest risk you've ever taken. And you're going to have to go into this mountain with all these, bad guys and everything. And you're going to, and he says, well, they won't listen to me. And he pulls out that sword that, from that is his by, his to inherit, because he's the rightful king, of whatever Middle Earth. I don't know all the technical. And he says they'll listen to this guy. And so what I say to these guys, you're 150 pounds overweight. You're 100 pounds overweight. You're carrying a sword like that for something.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's no different. You've never struggled with obesity, I don't believe, ever in your life, And so, but we all have struggles, and we all have weights that we carry, and but to be able to know that we're made for that kind of adventure and that kind of glory, and so so what the heck's this got to do with weight loss? Hey, if you're looking for a diet, there's like 10 million. God bless you. That's a thing. But if diets were the answer, it wouldn't be a $72 billion industry and growing by every second. So, we'd all have six-pack abs. But Jeff, any closing thoughts? I won't take you all day because I can sit here and talk to you till midnight.
I'll be honest with you. We always get that you're the adventure guy. I'm just like everybody else. I want to do the right thing. I don't want to take a lot of risk because I want to appear as if I've got everything together. I don't want to really look like a fool and make mistakes and things like that. So we all need these kinds of conversations to push us into taking and advancing and moving forward with God, because we're always transitioning from the ranger to the king stage, right? There's always these transitions that are coming up, and that we need a new faith to go into this exploration. So one of the stories I love to tell, and I could do this real quick, but on an Airbus, what you do when you land is you turn off the inertial reference units, your navigation units, and when you power them down, and the airplane has to stand still for 10 minutes while it senses the Earth's rotation to find out what true north is. And then once it finds it, it clears out all the past errors so that you're not going to carry them to the next leg of your journey, And so this is the important part of these transitions, is when you go from one to another, when you go from 300 pounds to 180, there are some errors that you've picked up from the last leg of your journey that you need to let go of them in order to continue forward with God. I think the greatest message and the thing I can leave you with is there's more. There's way more to life even than what I've experienced or anybody's experienced out here. And I want to grab it just like you. We got one shot at this thing. I don't want to be held back by anything.
And that's it. And that's where, when I see, a guy, like me, I was carrying 304 pounds on a 5'11" average frame. And everybody said, well, you're big bone. I said, no, I'm not. There's a lot of fat on here. And so, but it was this desire. And this is so common with men, with all these men. It fascinates me how what a common denominator that it is among them that I work with and to get the pleasure of talking to. But they have this perception that they can't do it, but they can. And when you look at shedding those pounds, doing whatever's necessary to do it healthy, I'm for that. Then you get to stretch the time. Because one of the things that got me, as you know, I was in the life insurance business and I sold senior adults. Okay, senior adults translates to people over 65 predominantly. I couldn't standing on that scale at 304. I could not remember ever meeting a 65-year-old man with 100 pounds or more to lose, ever. And really, maybe one, and I think this guy might have been 59 that had more than 100 pounds to lose. And so what it meant to me was my runway, and and not to use the an airline term, but my runway was very short. I was 55, and I'm like, I need to go another 40 years. I want to plan my 95th birthday party and stuff. And so, and it's just absolutely, it was kind of voluntary complacent suicide by continuing to stay there and giving that up. So I want to encourage guys, listen to what Jeff's saying. He might not have an extra 100 pounds on him, but he's saying the same thing. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I'd say consider this, that the answer so much does lie in movement. And when I say that it's difficult, it's a risk. I love what Norman McLean said. He was the one who wrote the book, A River Runs Through It. He said, while I'm on the Earth's side, the oxygen side of the Earth's crust, while I'm on the oxygen side of the Earth's crust, I want the second half of my life to be as difficult as the first half. In other words, he was going to keep moving, keep struggling, keep striving, and that movement meant everything to him. And so, and he leaves behind a legacy, and that as you move and you make these changes, you're going to inspire a nation of people who will drive hundreds of miles to see you run a mile. Right?
There you go. That's it. It's so cool. No, well, hey, thank you so much for being here. And for any of the guys that are watching, or if you know anybody that's struggling with obesity and they want to have an honest conversation, I'll put this in the show notes. You can go to transformmyfuture.com/apply and look at a time on my calendar that's free that works for you. And we'll have an honest conversation. I'm not for everybody. If you're looking for another diet, hey, I'm not your guy. But if you're looking to really have a transformative experience, it's pretty amazing what can happen, and it's exciting. Well, Jeff, congratulations. Go ahead.
Thank you. Make sure that you put my email in there in case anybody has any questions on.
Sure. I will.
Some good reading, for this idea of movement. I'll give you some books that will inspire you.
And you're not talking about going to the gym when he's talking about movement. He's talking about buying an Airstream kind of movement or getting an airplane.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right. All righty, man. Well, hey, thank you so much. And guys, we'll see y'all tomorrow. Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye-bye.